Hello, friends. We're going to continue our read aloud. Hello. Of the kids in Miss Coleman's class, Snow War. When we left off, we read about the kiddos. They're just not being nice to each other at all. They're stealing snowflakes that they're making for their winter carnival, destroying them, hiding them. It's just not nice. Then they take it out on the playground, and one of the girls throws an ice ball at a kid, and it misses the kid and hits poor Ian in the face and knocks out his tooth. Ay, 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 my goodness. I hope they can fix this soon. This is chapter 11. Ian gets mad. I can understand why he'd be mad, but let's find out why exactly. Ian could not believe his ears. His classmates could not believe theirs either. Not go to the winter carnival, repeated Nancy. That is what I said, replied Miss Coleman, and I meant it. If Ian's class had been quite quiet that morning, they were even quieter that afternoon. Everyone was quiet, even Miss Coleman. Ian knew the kids were embarrassed. No class had ever been told they could not go to the carnival. Toward the end of the day, Omar raised his hand. But we can go to the carnival if the snow war stops, can't we? He said. Yes, agreed Miss Coleman, but I am going to be watching you carefully. So is Mr. Tang. Ian felt himself blush. He glanced around the room. Some of his classmates were looking at their hands. Some were looking at the floor. Nobody was looking at Miss Coleman or at anyone else. When the last bell rang that afternoon, the kids jumped up from their desks. They hurried to their cubbies. This is all your fault, Tammy hissed to Bobby. You threw the very first snowball. Did not, Bobby hissed back. Do not let Miss Coleman hear you, Hank whispered. I won't, and anyway, this is your fault, Hank, said Bobby. Why is it mine? It was your stupid idea to build a fort. Well, it was Ricky's idea to wreck the girls' forts. Was not, exclaimed Ricky, but it does not matter. Audrey was the one who threw the ice ball. But Ian was the one sitting right on a rock where anyone could hit him, whispered Audrey. She glared at Ian. I guess the brain is not so smart after all. Rude. Ian opened his mouth. He was about to yell at Audrey. He was about to point out that the rock was under a tree, for heaven's sake. Then he turned around and looked at Miss Coleman. She was sitting at her desk, and she was watching her students carefully. So Ian stuck his tongue out at Audrey, but he did not say a word to her. Then he stuck his tongue out at Ricky and at Tammy and at Bobby and Hank and even Chris. Then he marched out of the classroom. Ian was mad. He was mad at every kid in the class. If the kids had not started the snow war, then they would not be in trouble. Ian was especially mad at Audrey, who was so stupid she would throw an ice ball at someone. Audrey, that was who. Stupid, stupid, stupid. I don't like that word. Ian was even mad at Miss Coleman. Miss Coleman had no right to say that Ian could not go to the carnival if the snow war did not stop. Ian had never been a part of the snow war. Ian was in a very bad mood when he woke up the next morning. He was still in a bad mood when he arrived at school, so he was particularly cross when he heard Mrs. Titus, the school principal, make this announcement over the loudspeaker. Good morning, girls and boys. It has come to my attention that some of you have been holding snowball wars on the playground. Yesterday, one of our students was injured when he was struck in the face by a snowball. It was an ice ball, muttered Ian. So from now on, Mrs. Titus continued, there will be no snowball throwing on school property. At all. Ever. Ian saw Audrey blush. Everyone in school would know that this was the fault of the kids in Miss Coleman's class. Aw, man, whispered Omar. We cannot even throw snowballs anymore. The other kids grumbled and muttered. Karen said, now what are we going to do at recess? And Ian replied, I do not know, but none of this is my fault. And it's not. Poor Ian. Chapter 12, The Spaceman. All that morning in school, Ian worked very hard. He paid attention to Miss Coleman. He kept his eyes on her or on his work. He did not look around at the other kids. He did not even look across the room at Chris. When he heard Tammy complain that she was going to be so bored on the playground if she could not throw snowballs, he just stared down at his spelling words. When he saw Bobby making monkey faces at Natalie during silent reading, he just kept on reading. At lunchtime, Ian watched his classmates. Since they were all so mad at each other, he wondered where they would sit. They sat down at 3 tables in their 3 groups, but the groups did not seem very happy. Nobody was saying much. At Karen's table, the girls did not even sit next to each other. They left empty chairs between their places. Rats and toads, said Ian. Ian carried his lunch to an empty table. He sat down by himself. There is the brain, said a voice from another table. Ian stood up. He moved to a different chair. He sat down with his back to his classmates. Then he opened Beyond Space and began to read. He was in chapter 4 of his new book. I didn't say it correctly. Beyond Space. There we go. Once again, the Xers were hurtling through space, only this time they wanted to hurtle to whatever was beyond space. Ian chewed and read and chewed. He took a bite of his sandwich, and he tried once more to imagine himself hurtling through space. Then, suddenly, Ian got a great, big, enormous, wonderful idea. It was so great that it made him forget about his classmates and their fight and the snow war. It nearly made him forget the Xers. Ian jumped up. He stuffed his book in the pocket of his jacket and snapped the pocket shut. Then he tossed his trash in a garbage can, and then he found Mr. Morton, the cafeteria monitor. Mr. Morton, could I take a tray with me to the playground today? He asked. Please? What for? Asked Mr. Morton. Ian told him his great idea, and Mr. Morton said, Well, I don't see why not. Go ahead. So Ian zipped up his jacket, put on his hat and mittens, grabbed the cafeteria tray, and ran outside. He carried his tray to the top of the hill at the far end of the playground. Then he looked out at the rest of the playground. He saw his classmates trickling outside. Most of them stood around glumly. They looked sadly at their snow forts. Then they looked angrily at each other. Well, thought Ian, I am not going to be all mad and bored and waste my recess. What do you think Ian's going to do at the top of a hill with a lunch tray? A plastic tray at the top of the hill. Does that sound like something? Something that's also usually made of plastic that you take to the top of a snowy hill? Ian placed the tray in the snow at the top of the hill. He looked at the bottom of the hill. He thought of the Xers hurtling through space, and then he knelt down, threw himself on the tray, pushed off with his feet, and whoosh! Ian was hurtling through space. He felt like an Xer. He flew down the snowy hill on his stomach. The wind blew his hair back, and Ian could feel icy air on his cheeks. At the bottom of the hill, the tray came to a gentle stop. Yes, thought Ian. Ian carried the tray back to the top of the hill. This time he sat on the tray and sailed down the hill on his bottom. Hurtling through space, thought Ian. Now I know why the Xers like space travel so much. At the bottom of the hill, Ian found himself looking up at Chris and Omar. Their eyes were shining. Cool idea, Ian, said Chris. Can we try that? We will continue with chapter 13, Apologies. So maybe Ian's bright idea will help get rid of all the grumpiness and everyone can apologize to each other. Stay tuned to find out.